Hello and welcome to the latest webinar here at Smart Cities World, the global hub for sharing solutions to solve urban challenges, supported today by Ubicquia. My name is Luke Antoniou. I'm senior editor at Smart Cities World, and I will also be your host during the next hour. You won't be hearing too much from me, though. We have a great lineup of speakers with us for this session who are going to be taking an in-depth look at how the city of Dallas is innovating with its residents very much kind of front of mind. And our session today is a bit of a companion piece to the latest Smart Cities World city profile on Dallas, which is available to download now. So if you keep an eye out for the link in the chat, if you're yet to read it, have a look. It's been put together with great attention to detail in partnership with the city, the National League of Cities, and Ubicquia. It really provides some great examples of urban innovation across the gamut, really. So in environment, mobility, governance, economy, and much more as well. So I would recommend taking a look. And for those of you who are here because you've already read it, thank you. And you will likely be familiar with some of what's coming up and what we'll be talking about here today. And I'm sure you'll have your own questions, so do make sure to send those in using the Q&A function in Zoom. That goes for just about everybody. So have a look at the questions. Get your questions in as we go through, and we'll answer as many as we can towards the end of the session. So without any further ado, I'm going to invite our guests for this session to come and join me on screen and introduce themselves. So come on in, guys. And let's go around. I suppose, in the order that you're on my screen in. Genesis in Dallas, we'll start with you.
Great. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in this wonderful globe that we call home. My name is Genesis Gavino, and I currently serve as Chief of Staff and Resilience Officer in the city of Dallas. I oversee a number of things: the Broadband Digital Equity Strategic Plan, a lot of our our digital equity initiatives. Also have oversight of the city manager's administrative oversight for the city manager's office, and also the mayor city council office. Additionally, I also convene our internal team for our smart city initiatives. I oversee the governance work group that provides guidance for our smart city initiatives here at the city. So just a tidbit of a few things that I have on my plate here at the city of Dallas.
Yeah, they certainly keep you busy out there in Dallas, that's for sure. Mike, we'll come to you next.
Hello, and thank you for having me on. My name is Mike Grigsby. I am the Director of Business Development for Ubicquia. Ubicquia is a smart street lighting controls company. We are working with cities around, certainly in the US and in other locales, to help them develop and enable their lighting infrastructure for intelligence and situational awareness across their city. My background has been as a public sector CIO. I've served in public safety, public transportation, and municipal agencies. And I've been in the smart city space since 2011, working on projects literally across the globe. And what's happened in Dallas, and we'll dig into it, but what's happening in Dallas may be emerging as a model that a lot of cities will want to adopt and replicate. So happy to be on.
Brilliant. And last but certainly not least, Joey.
Hey, thanks for having me. Hi, everyone. My name is Joey Breems. I am the Senior Executive and Director for Municipal Practice here at the, I should say, U.S. National League of Cities. We are a longstanding organization that supports cities, towns, and villages across this country, working with mayors, local elected leaders, and civil servants to improve the quality of life and governance in localities in the United States. Previously, I worked for the city of DC, actually, for a number of years as Chief of Staff for Internal Services. So took part in overseeing a number of local government functions, including contracting, HR, technology, construction. So I can relate to Genesis and a number of you are on the call here about what it takes to really run a city, and I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Brilliant. Thank you all so much for taking the time out and coming and taking part. And for those of you watching, here's a little bit of a snapshot of what we have coming up for you. So we've had our introductions. So we're going to be looking a little bit at Dallas's opportunities for change and how they've kind of recognized those. The Red Cloud Initiative, which won Smart City Award earlier this year, I believe. How that's been done, the importance of data, and then the benefits and results that have come out of that. And then we'll come to the questions. So do get your questions in. But before we come to that, Joey, I'm going to hand over to you as a little bit of a scene setter, really, before we hear about what's happening in Dallas and find out really about how the NLC has been working to spotlight case studies like this in Dallas and support cities in becoming smarter and more sustainable over time.
Sure. Yeah, and I really appreciate, again, being on this conversation. One of my favorite things to do is to dig into what is actually going on the ground. So I know that Dallas has a lot of really interesting stuff to show us. But for those of you unfamiliar, as I mentioned, National League of Cities is a membership organization working with government leaders across the U.S. I did want to note that we are proudly entering our 100th year in 2024. So we were founded in 1924 in Lawrence, Kansas. And so we will be going into a year of big celebration around the power of cities, power of city leaders, and the kind of change that we can make in this country and in the world. And a few things I just wanted to highlight for folks on the call that we have online and you can take a look at and even take part in. One is over the past, I want to say almost 5 years now, we've had an ongoing Future of Cities initiative here at the National League of Cities where we have really deep dived into a number of topics. What are the technologies and disruptors shaping different areas of both municipal government and just life in cities? So the future of work, the future of retail, equity, really a wide range of topics. So if you want to take a look at what we have produced thus far, please go on our website, nlc.org. You can look at the Future of Cities initiative. We also launched just this past year an innovation staff network. So up right now, we have 235 cities across the US, and I imagine some internationally too, who have joined our LinkedIn network. We share a host of resources. We allow members to share. We put out webinars, reports, and it's really a free-flowing community to swap ideas, make connections, and find opportunities to advance smart cities work in your municipality. And then lastly, and this is much more of a US-focused program, but one that I think will be of interest nonetheless to our international partners and friends. We launched in the past year or so something called the Local Infrastructure Hub. So as many of you know, the US Congress passed over the past year or so some major bills around building out infrastructure, including digital infrastructure across the US. And so we, alongside many partner organizations, host a series of boot camps and coaching sessions and direct connections to federal agencies putting out trillions of dollars to support this work, how especially mid and smaller size cities can access those funds, some tips and tricks for how you can meet the match, and a number of pieces of information to help you get those dollars to build out your infrastructure. So I'm highlighting that because I know that's quite relevant to those of you interested in achieving much of the smart cities work that we're going to talk about today. And so wanted you all to take a look. But again, we do infinitely more than this. I'm happy to touch on it as we go through the presentation, but I want to really get into what Dallas and Ubicquia have to offer. So thanks.
No, brilliant. Thanks, Joey. And like you say, we'll come back to you, as we go, because it's great to really find out what you're thinking about what's happened in Dallas and how other cities might be able to apply that as well. So we'll hear from you again a little later on. But for now, though, I'm going to hand over to Genesis and to Mike to take us through what comes next. And just let me know when you're ready for the next slide, guys. I'm going to disappear.
Thank you, Luke, and thank you, Joey, for the primer on what NLC does. As a NLC member for the city of Dallas, we have truly benefited from being part of a large network of cities, whether they are small cities or major urban metropolitan areas like Dallas is. And just as Joey said, I think they run the gamut of the type of technical assistance or even just knowledge that they provide cities. And even if you are an international partner, joining us for this call, I think the resources available on their website can also demonstrate how you can partner with local, U.S. cities. And then also they demonstrate how you can also build capacity across our with different partners. And so we're truly grateful for NLC and also Smart Cities World for profiling the city of Dallas and the work that we do related to smart cities initiatives, right? For those who haven't had a chance to go over the profile, I can totally understand. There's so many other things that you want to read at this moment, but I do encourage you to read our profile because you do get to hear more about the different challenges, or I should say opportunities for change that are present in Dallas, right? And some of it might even sound familiar to what is happening in your own jurisdictions, whether that's locally or internationally. And so, in our profile, we talk very clearly about, we have some key issues or opportunities for change, data and connectivity, urban mobility, community and governance, economic development, land use and urban planning, and then environmental and energy. But specific to the initiative that we're going to talk about today, which is the Red Cloud Neighborhood Initiative, we focus on 4 key areas, one being data and connectivity, economic development, community and governance, and then urban planning. So in data and connectivity, we know that we have a digital divide, right? Dallas is one of the least connected cities, urban cities in the country. I think we rank 10th on the list. And yet we have we have several telecommunications or internet service providers in the city of Dallas, but that speaks to the lack of investment in infrastructure from the private side. So the question becomes, what then is the city doing to increase awareness and availability for internet, right? But not just internet, but also digital literacy skills and training. And then we get into economic development. We know that public-private partnerships often are more, look to areas that are already well established in the city where they know that they can get a return on their investment. And so how are we then at the city really positioning ourselves and positioning our various neighborhoods to be those test locations for different ways in which we can partner with the private sector or bring in other partners that can then also create economic activity in these neighborhoods that previously and historically has not seen that. Community and governance really has to do with how we truly live up our values of service here at the city of Dallas. We have 5 E's. They're empathy, ethics, excellence, engagement, and equity. You'll see that across how we do our work here at the city. But engagement and equity really gets to how we center the voices of our historically disinvested, disadvantaged communities and how that shows up in the decisions that we make as policymakers, as implementers, as administrators, right? And then finally, it's urban planning. How are we looking at our neighborhoods holistically and thinking about the different uses that are potentially incompatible, right? And then looking forward, funny enough, our comprehensive plan is called Forward Dallas. So looking forward to the future of what we want our cities to look like, and then how do we integrate engagement in that, in the planning of our future land uses in our urban planning for the city. And so with that, we can, so that's the macro level, right? Of kind of like, what are the opportunities that exist within Dallas? And then drilling down specifically for Red Cloud, which we'll get into in the next slide. We talk about, the next slide has 2 pictures that kind of give you a sense of what the Red Cloud neighborhood looks like before all of the different investment and infrastructure that went into it. And this might even look like some of the neighborhoods that you live in, right? So we have very narrow streets, lack of street lights. ADA accessibility is also, a high issue. That was a high issue in these neighborhoods. or in this neighborhood, you look at the size of the sidewalk, and you think about accessibility for not just people with strollers or people with different abilities, right? So then we think about the things that you don't see here in terms of physical infrastructure. We talk about internet access. We know we've done a lot of work in better understanding what neighborhoods in the city of Dallas have low connectivity or no connectivity at all. And Red Cloud came up as one of them. Also not seen in these pictures is a high crime rate in this neighborhood. We know that the connection between high crime rate and then the lack of infrastructure, mainly streetlights in certain areas, and how that can contribute to high crime rates. So these are all some of the issues that we identified, right? And so if we go to the next slide, how did Red Cloud really come to the top of the list for us, and how we're thinking about, Dallas is 385 square miles large. We have 1.3 million people in Dallas, and some of our neighborhoods definitely look different than more prosperous, more invested neighborhoods. And so how did we prioritize Red Cloud neighborhood, right? So again, living up to our values of service here at the City of Dallas, prioritizing equity, and really looking at what neighborhoods haven't had that type of investment in the past. And then also thinking about how we use artificial intelligence to think about, what can our existing infrastructure tell us about these areas and what their needs are. And then also looking at the quality of life. So layering all of these different decision points and data points to tell us a story. But data is only data without that background information, without that qualitative data, right? Of the true stories of how these types of issues are impacting our communities and impacting the residents of Red Cloud neighborhood directly. And so layering all of that, then we get to our partnership with Ubicquia, which I'll turn it over to Mike to talk briefly about the technology there.
Thank you, Genesis. So as a smart streetlight controls company, Ubicquia looks at the ubiquitous presence of streetlights across the entirety of a city. Most of the cities are using what's called a universal plug-in on top of the streetlights for photo cells. Ubiquia comes along and now makes that an intelligent asset, and it allows the cities to collect a lot of information that's happening within the light itself. So with regard to what's happening with power and line conditioning, you can talk about there's a tilt vibration monitor to see what's happening with the pole itself. You can also determine and control whether the light is on and control whether the light is on or off. So that little bit of intelligence from an environment standpoint within the kind of the lighting network itself provides a level of intelligence back to the city. We also, Ubicquia also provides what's called the UB Hub. So this provides a managed switch on top of the lighting infrastructure that allows the connection of third-party sensors. So we can talk about an Internet of Things, looking at cameras, looking at license plate readers, public Wi-Fi in the case of Red Cloud. We can look at many, many different sensors that can be connected. This not only provides intelligence about what's happening at the light, but around the environment that the lights sit in. So those neighborhoods, those communities, and being able to get that level of situational awareness and be able to address that provides the cities with just a measure of responsiveness that they may not have had previous to that. As Genesis mentioned, you can see the way that the neighborhoods looked before, and you'll see some after pictures here coming up. But Ubicquia partners together with cities to be able to enable that level of intelligence across the city. And not only that, but with the given nature of lights and how many there are, hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands within different cities, it's a very low entry or kind of maybe even a zero entry point in some cases for cities to get into the smart city space at scale. It's been one of the challenges. I mentioned that I've been in the space since 2011. Cities have been challenged to really make investments beyond small or minor pilot projects and really pull that into a production side. And so being able to enable assets like this at scale gives the city a very, very widespread, again, level of influence and level of responsiveness. You can see here from what's being presented on the screen as not only are we providing access, like I said, access and intelligence at the lighting network, but being able to engage and enable new third-party sensors like air quality monitor sensors, and just, again, a lot of third-party sensors that can give you different intelligence. These are the things that we were able to do inside of Dallas. Genesis?
Thanks, Mike. And I will say that, again, I want to go back to the community engagement piece of this, that we didn't just come into this neighborhood and say, this is what you're getting, right? Aside from us looking at the data that and understanding what are the needs of this neighborhood, we recognize that it's going to take more than just one department working on this. And so, which is what brought us to this type of technology using the UB Hub, and knowing that it's not just going to be a public safety measure, but it's also going to help us bridge the digital divide in this neighborhood. It is also going to help us with air quality monitoring, right? So truly a multi-service platform. And I think that also gets to kind of the resilience of the technology, but then the resilience of the neighborhood, in that we're not just addressing one thing. There is a cascading effect and a multi-factor effect there that, you know, with this type of technology, we are helping we're addressing more than just one issue that has been identified by the community. And so look, if you don't mind going to the next slide, so we can show the before and after side by side of the pictures in Red Cloud. Right, so which, I mean, it's not the exact side by side, but you can see the widened streets on the right. So the pictures on the right column shows you the new streets as it is, right? Better sidewalks, more lighting available, and just a resurfaced or repaved street compared to what they had before. And we'll go to the next slide, just talk a little about our efforts here. Again, this is not a one department effort. This truly took the work and coordination across the entire organization, because we had public safety, we had public works, we had our transportation department, our water department, and then you have our IT department. So everybody was truly involved in this, because without that cross-departmental effort, this never would have been successful. We had to layer on the different plans and work that we were doing individually and see how we can synergize all of that work, so that essentially we were digging just once, right? So a lot, when you think about the smart city technology here, that requires backhaul. And with that backhaul, it needs to go somewhere. You have to dig in the ground. And so for us, if we can dig once and then also provide the solution one time, that is a win for us. And so being able to dig once, lay the fiber necessary for the backhaul, and then repave the streets, install new sidewalks, that was truly monumental for us. Sad to say that, you know, we don't do that cross-departmental effort as often, but this did create an opportunity to show us like what worked, what didn't work, and how can we make it work better for other for future neighborhoods where we can do this same type of work. And so, you know, additionally, obviously we updated the infrastructure, putting in new streetlights and replacing the old streetlights that needed to be replaced. And then also the connectivity gap. We knew that a majority of the households lacked internet connectivity. And so providing that to them so that they wouldn't have to, you know, leave their homes in order to get connection for their kids or for even them to use the internet. That was really important for us, allowing people to stay in their homes and stay in their neighborhoods. And on the next slide really is the focus on how we use data to transform the Red Cloud neighborhood. Again, leading with equitable data. I can't stress enough how this work was cross-departmental, because our Office of Equity and Inclusion also does a lot of data capturing and understanding what are some of the equitable indicators or equity indicators in neighborhoods across the entire city, looking at where are there disparities and then also understanding where is the infrastructure needs, and then working together to close the gap and partnering with Ubicquia, and then also other agencies across the city to really bring this project to life. So with that, I didn't know, Mike, did you want to jump in and add additional?
Yeah. So, you know, the question, one of the questions that came up in the Q&A, I think touches on this from a standpoint of, you know, what does that ROI look like? And, you know, for the majority of communities, you're going to find operational cost savings, you're going to find maintenance cost savings, and those are primary and or key benefits that come out of it. But the intangibles, when you start looking at the community benefits of having more people out in their space because they feel safe, or when they start seeing more investment in the neighborhood from neighbors, not just external to that, but internal to the communities. Those are some intangibles, but they can track and measure that benefit. The reduction in crime, the increase in, again, just neighborhood ownership are some of those intangibles that are really benefited, or I should say facilitated, out of changes like this. And when you're able to see kind of a one fell swoop almost approach that Dallas took to this neighborhood, looking at it through a public works lens and then layering the technology on top of that. As I mentioned earlier, I think that is a new, it's certainly an innovative approach that cities can be looking at to as a model that may emerge for how to address a lot of these underserved or disinvested neighborhoods within their communities. So this point that Dallas has made, not only looking at Red Cloud from what they've already accomplished, but then looking at how to grow and how to blossom it into other areas of the community, is something that we should all be taking a look at.
Can I add, Mike? So answering some questions that I see in the chat, the cost impact to residents, right? So there was, I wouldn't say there was a direct cost to them. I mean, sure, there was a cost in terms of inconvenience with the construction that was happening in their neighborhood. Financially, so this comes out of our general fund. Even with all of the infrastructure dollars that are coming down at the federal level here in the United States, we are using this as kind of our proof of concept on bringing this to scale across the city, and taking advantage of the funding that is available at the federal level. So being able to do this with our general fund dollars sets us up perfectly to say, we've done this and we can use this. We can use IRA or IJA dollars in the future. That sets up, you know, the financial stability there of, you know, how that without impact to our general fund dollars. And then I think I saw a question about coordinating with water management. So I know that there wasn't a specific water project here, but because we had to dig in the neighborhood, there was coordination with our water utilities department. I think I will defer to Mike on the public safety question on accessing that.
Yeah, I think the public safety side, the question, you know, is regarding regulatory effects on this. There are many facets to that question, and each community is going to handle it a little differently. I think one of the things that Dallas did, and certainly other communities will follow suit on this, is getting access, or not getting access, but getting input from the community ahead of time. You know, Genesis mentioned that this is not just something that was being done or done to the neighborhood, but being done with their input, with their cooperation, and done for them. And so public safety certainly has a lot of regulatory components that it needs to address. And, you know, we look at other communities, other smart city initiatives that in the past have not gone as well as we had intended them. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that they didn't initiate or engage the community ahead of time. And so I cannot highlight that point enough, is to engage the community ahead of time, but then also not just look at public safety through the lens of law enforcement. Public safety is a wide umbrella, and there are many, many different departments, many different components within the community that serve that public safety component, public safety element, and gathering input to understand what is the most meaningful and most beneficial points to that. We had, just as an aside, we had heard from a mayor from a community who talked about the investment of technology and for our underserved communities, looking at this kind of helping them shift their thinking into this is their way to regain some safety and security within their communities, as opposed to just simply looking at this as an over policing, over surveilling element. So a lot of conversation needs to take place in that, and getting the input from the community is essential.
And
yeah, so along the lines of the input from the community, I will, there was a question from Mike about objections from residents. So I'm sure that they did have, so we worked very, very closely with the council member that represents the neighborhood or the district that this neighborhood is in. And also we provided bilingual interpretation, also opportunities for people to learn more about what we were doing in this area even before we broke ground. And so there was a lot of community engagement in partnership with our elected officials. So it was getting them on board first and explaining truly what we were doing here, and then providing him, the council member, the resources necessary so that he can then go into this neighborhood and talk one-on-one with the residents about what this is going to look like in the future, what impacts it's going to have on them, and how it's going to benefit them as well. Joey, I think you were going to jump in.
Yeah, I just wanted to highlight from a national perspective, just a few kind of best practices that you all used in this project that I just want to name it for folks that may not be kind of familiar with or thinking about them. One is, you know, there's a concept when you're doing infrastructure projects right out there called like dig once. So one thing that I'm noting that you all did very well is that you saw that this is an opportunity. You're opening up the street. You're going to be tearing up a lot of things and inconveniencing a lot of people. Do it as infrequently as possible. So try to pack in as many projects into that one dig as possible. That seems sort of a bit no duh, but like it's hard when you're trying to coordinate so many different agencies, so many different programs, streams of funding. But to the extent that that is feasible for a city to do, that's absolutely something we see out there as a best practice. Dig once. The other is, especially as you're getting into issues of public safety, questions of surveillance, you know, there are a lot of fraught conversations around certain communities being over surveilled and the concern there. You know, something that I want to note that Dallas was mindful in doing here is that it wasn't just about attaching some cameras to a streetlight, right? Like you could have done that very quickly and pretty cheaply and moved on. That was just surveillance, pure and simple. The project here sought to make sure that the streetlights themselves were upgraded, that the roads were repaired, that you had wider sidewalks. There was a whole host of community concerns that were addressed in this one project, so that it was more about responsiveness to that neighborhood's needs and desires, as opposed to just achieving a city government goal and then moving on to the next thing. So just thinking about, again, the dig once, and then overbalancing by addressing community concerns primarily. And you might have some of these public safety issues to address as well, but that not being the only thing that you do.
Yes, and I was trying to answer this in the chat about sharing details on the process and resources that were used to identify the neighborhood status on connectivity. So in 2021, or was it 2020? All those years blended together. But we worked with a consultant to develop our broadband and digital equity strategic plan. Within that, we actually have a statistically significant survey that we did to ask the community about their connectivity needs and even their connectivity status. But even on top of that, so we also added the ACS data. So that's the American Community Survey. And then on top of that, we also use data from our Digital Navigators program, telling us where are these areas where they're doing on the ground engagement with these families, because we have identified those top zip codes, that we know where there's no connectivity, right? And so they do that qualitative analysis or data gathering of why aren't you connected to the internet? Is it because you can't get service to your home, or because you don't know you don't know that you need to get on to, like, whether it's fiber to the home or you should be using more than just a hotspot? So our digital navigators give us that data every month about where they are serving and the type of information they're getting from the clients that they service. Then on top of that, we have our library, we have, I think, I want to say like 30 different branches across the city, and they are located in these areas where we know connectivity is needed. And so when they check out hotspots and laptops, so that's part of their digital equity strategy, is providing that package combo. We can ask the questions of, okay, do you not have internet in the home? What is this used for, right? Obviously, it's all optional, but that gives us additional data points to really think about what is the need in these areas. And as people sign up for their library card and they check things out, we know which neighborhood they live in. Let's see.
Genesis, there's one question in there that talks about the community engagement. You've talked about that a little bit already, but what are some of the metrics you were using either before or after, and things that you know that you're going to begin tracking?
Yeah, so I mean, obviously we go where we use a lot of different data points to help us pinpoint kind of where we should really focus our efforts when we look at language accessibility, because we know that in the city of Dallas, we have 5 top languages that we know people speak, but then we have an additional, map that we can drill down by zip code. What are those different languages? And this is based off of census data, but our dashboard is, we built that as an addition to that. So when we're doing community engagement, right, really thinking about what are the language access needs that are in these communities, but then also on top of that, looking at digital literacy skills. What do we know about communities based off of ACS? And then what is the ACS not telling us on top of that? And so layering all of those different points, and then also from the broadband digital equity strategic plan, what were the responses from the survey? And then also in the mapping that they've done in recognizing where are their connectivity needs in our community.
It's fantastic. I know we still have some questions coming in, but Luke, let's show the short video from the ribbon cutting. I think that will provide a little bit more information, and then we can continue with the discussion after that.
We're here to celebrate the completion of a comprehensive initiative to address infrastructure, lighting, public safety, and internet access issues here in the Red Cloud community. Like many neighborhoods in southern Dallas, the infrastructure in Red Cloud had long been neglected. Red Cloud is a shining example of what we can do when the city focuses on revitalizing existing neighborhoods and enhancing public safety by investing in our communities and our people.
Well, there you have it.
Yep.
Hopefully that all came across okay. But yeah, it's an amazing project, and we have a couple of slides left before we can kind of delve back into what's left of the Q&A. But keep the questions coming in, and I'll hand back to you guys to go through these benefits and results.
Yeah, I mean, I think we've already talked about the benefits and results that we've seen. I mean, we just launched earlier this year, right? And so we're still collecting data on what we have, I guess, the benefits. But I think one of the benefits that we point to a lot recently, I think it was the weekend after, or the same week that we were actually in Denver collecting our Smart 50 award, we ended up having to utilize the video recordings from this neighborhood for a crime that happened overnight. And so we were able to see in real time, right, while we were in Denver, like how we were able to use that video, and our Dallas Police Department was able to access that video as well. But had we not had this there, we wouldn't have been able to do what we needed to do in terms of public safety. And so that, I think that was just one of the main benefits that we can point to immediately. But then also the 200 plus household or individuals in this neighborhood, immediate neighborhood, that benefit from internet connectivity that they did not have before. So really, truly, I mean, we're collecting data, but then also seeing in real time how we can leverage this initiative. And I do want to answer one question. I think that somebody asked about, maybe I didn't. Okay, so it may have disappeared, but I think we'll get to it when we get back to the Q&A. Mike, did you want to add anything else on this slide before we go to the next one?
No, just to piggyback on what you were saying, you know, it's interesting to see the immediate benefits of that. And you know, I think one of the questions that I saw in there was, what's the total length? How long ago did the city of Dallas decide on this? And then what's been the overall time frame that the city has been working on this particular initiative?
Oh gosh, I think I want to say at least 2 years, and it was more than a year for planning, right? And then a year or so for the actual construction and shovels in the ground.
Yeah, it's easy when we start looking at the kind of the wrap up, if you will, for projects like this, that we miss the amount of time, the investment that goes into it. And this goes back to the community engagement and how important it is to engage the stakeholders early on and continuously throughout the project.
And I know there was 2 questions about the cost. I will have to get back to them on that, and we'll just have to. I'm trying to look in our profile to see if we actually put the specific amount. We'll just have to get that person's contact information.
Yeah, that's absolutely fine. If there are questions at the end that we're not able to answer, we will get back to you, providing we have your permission to do so, which you will have given us already. If so, we'll keep an eye on those. Keep your questions coming in. So. All good stuff. I'll move on to our next slide here, which I believe just sees us wrapping up, and then we can get to a few more questions.
Yeah. So this was a question that I saw in there. What's next? And when a city like Dallas enables assets like their street lighting, this is just a single entry point into what you can do in that smart city space, and find additional intelligence, find additional situational awareness, find additional quality of life benefits for the city. And so as Ubicquia plays in the center of this and becomes somewhat of a broker of technologies into these neighborhoods, I think the question of what's next is almost an endless one. As we begin to work within our own ecosystem, the partners that we're already engaged with, and as new players come to the table, as we are thinking about new solutions, I think the work that not only the technology side can do, but also what the resident and city demands are, is going to steer and direct our development and growth in this space. For Dallas, and Genesis, I think you can speak to this, but for Dallas, the idea of what's next is, how do we get this into more neighborhoods within the city of Dallas? And I would think that is the same question that a lot of communities that are online and listening to this conversation right now are starting to think, is how do you start? And then how do you grow it into the majority, or to more into your communities?
Yeah, good point. I mean, I think starting internally is always a good point of to start with, and aligning your efforts internally is always a good start. So I do see a lot of questions about, or 2, I think, about GHG emissions, and Mike, you'll have to correct me if I'm wrong, on the air quality monitoring component of that. I don't think that's live yet, but I will say we do have a full climate action plan that we align to, and our Office of Environmental Quality and Sustainability is working with our Public Works Department to determine how this connects to other air quality monitoring that we do across the city.
Yep.
And then I will need further clarification from Jerry about your question on the questionnaire that the digital navigators use. Like, are you asking about intake questionnaire, or after intake when they're determining what services that the resident specifically needs? And then specific about the benefits for accessibility for persons with disability or reduced mobility, I will say the The newer sidewalks was that main component, because as you saw in the previous pictures, it wasn't wide enough, and then there was not access, clear access from like ramps in terms of that. I don't think we had a picture on that, but there were actual curb cutouts now in different corners across the neighborhood. I think there are, if I recall correctly, the way that the neighborhood is situated, I think there's at least 5 or 6 curb cutouts that people can now access without any barriers or, overgrown bush or grass preventing them from accessing that. Let's see. Did I miss anything?
And if I can, Genesis, just offer a reflection on sort of like zooming out a little bit. Because I think when these kinds of projects are being considered, I mentioned like the dig once, and it gets very difficult to understand sort of like what are all of the things that we are going to include in this project, and what does this community value. And often, my own experience, even working here in DC, surveys only ask so many questions, and if you don't ask the right questions, you might not get the right information. So all that to say, one approach that I myself found when I was working for the District of Columbia that felt like it worked very well is that when we would go into our budget season, so when we're shaping the city budget, we would actually do neighborhood-based budget engagement forums. And that was very low tech. We'd go into community centers, we would host an evening, have food, always have food, host an evening, food, childcare, people would come in. You'd have great breakout tables for community members to sit with neighbors or people they'd never met in their local area, and basically work with them to break down 100% of a budget, right? It's very conceptual, but it raises some really interesting questions about, do we have a lean towards public safety here? Do we have a lean towards education? To the question of accessibility. I can recall one conversation where it seemed like the predominant voices in the room were all about invest in the public schools. But that particular neighborhood was near a largely deaf-serving university. And so we had some folks from that community raise their hand and say, public schools aren't really doing much for us, but we need safer streets. We need to be able to cross the street safely. So just having community members talk with government officials there listening about how they would divvy up money actually is a really great and effective way in one evening to elevate all of those issues that you can then think how to wrap into a more comprehensive project. It felt like it worked very well here in DC and was kind of a fun democracy in action activity.
Yeah, I can't stress enough, right? During budget season, we have a statistically significant survey that's done by a consultant, but then we also have, surveys that are done at the district level that is led by our council members. And so I think combining all of those different data points that tells us then what are these community preferences really helps us in what types of initiatives we need to prioritize in different neighborhoods.
Perfect. I mean, we've got some great questions left over. And we've got just over 10 minutes to get through what's here, which is perfect. Genesis, you referenced earlier the other question around greenhouse gas emissions. I wanted to just come back on the other one. So were there efforts to compute greenhouse gas emissions reduction impact as a result of this project? If yes, can you share how you did it? And I suppose the opposite of that is also true. If no, are you planning to?
So I think that's still in the works with our Office of Environmental Quality and Sustainability, what that tie-in is to measuring those GHGs. So that's TBD, I guess, how I would answer that one.
Sure.
And then I will say, I did see a question earlier, like what were the prioritization categories, or what made Red Cloud kind of the first one to go, right? I think I will say, because of the IoT component of this project, we needed to make sure that we had backhaul, or there was a city facility nearby that we could connect to that can serve as the backhaul. And so for us, that was a fire station. I think it's just like down the street. And so that allowed us to then connect to our own service, our own, what is the technical term? Our own service. So we are not, I think Mike may have answered this, but I will say we are not serving as an internet service provider. It is completely free to the residents, and the internet is the city's internet. So similar to when you go to any public Wi-Fi kind of connectivity, it tells you, hey, you're connecting to this, acknowledge this, blah, blah, blah. That's what ours is. And there's no need to sign up for anything for the residents. We're trying to reduce as many barriers as possible for them.
Yeah, the Ubicquia nor the city is Ubicquia is not serving as the internet service provider on that. We provided the public wireless access points so that it would be broadcast in the neighborhoods and people could log onto it as they would if they were in any other public area.
And there was another question in the chat here as well that I wanted to come back to, which again really demonstrates, the extent to which a project like this can serve as a bit of a launch pad for other smart city initiatives. The question is for you, Mike, on whether or not you're already combining street lighting and like EV charging points together, whether that's something that you're looking to do. Also, the ability to do that as an incremental thing and scale out from this point.
Yeah, that is not something that we're doing currently. We've had discussions around this. Obviously, that is not the core of what Ubicquia does, so we would need to bring our partners into that. I can envision opportunities to do that and certainly what that would look like, but that is not currently a service that we're providing right now.
I can say, Luke, that we have started to see more cities investigate this kind of public-private model. And sorry, by public-private, I actually mean, building out like a public service or a public station and then offering sort of private citizen access to those services. So you can see in a number of cities when, for example, like a public garage is built, often they will come equipped with charging stations. I've also seen a few cities for those cities that have their own like bus and public transit fleets. I've seen some start to shift more and more towards full electrification of those fleets. And so as they're building out sort of repair and charging stations, which obviously need quite a bit of power to charge up a bus, offering public access to high-speed chargers for private citizens to use as well. And I will say that the integration of electric vehicles and electric vehicle infrastructure and the sort of grid resilience that's going to be needed to make that really viable and widespread is something that we at NLC are hearing a lot from our member cities. And so we're going to be digging quite a bit into that topic over this next year. So we actually just launched a partnership with the Siemens Foundation to focus on how to build out the workforce to kind of build and maintain all of that infrastructure. We're going to have a couple of other partnerships coming out. So long way of saying stay tuned, but absolutely kind of the next and most immediate frontier I see in smart city work.
I think that's really interesting. And like you say, we are seeing more and more cities kind of doing things this way. I think it's been really, really instructive working with Genesis a little bit over the last, I don't even remember when we first started talking about putting this profile together, but it was probably about March. But just seeing the approach that's been taken and then seeing, how much of a model this can really be for other cities to follow as well. I think that's one of the biggest takeaways from this, and a lot of the advice and questions that you've answered is around where other cities can get started. So in the last few minutes that we've got left, I want to come to each of you and just ask that question. What is your kind of sign off here? What is the one thing that you would send people away with to go and get started on something like this for themselves?
I'll go first. I think what really worked well with the city of Dallas was the priorities that were set for us, not just by our leadership and our elected officials, but also our communities, right? We have a comprehensive environmental climate action plan. We have a racial equity plan. We have an economic development plan. We have so much feedback from our communities that tell us what they want to see and how they want to see the future of Dallas. And from that, aligning all of that so that we have this multi-layered, multifaceted way that in which we prioritize our different projects, and we align internally all of our own internal projects and goals to that, right? So it's like, it's not just, you know, oh, council wants to see X, Y, and Z next year, but also looking back, what did we hear from our community? And also thinking about survey fatigue, right? We've done a million different surveys with our communities, and we've heard it time and time again. We've come and responded to your surveys already. We already told you what you needed, just do the work. And so for us, it's like, okay, now we're really putting boots on the ground and doing the work that you want us to do. So truly living up to the values that we set for ourselves, but then also the expectations that our community has for us has been really key for us, and aligning all of our work to that.
Yeah, I think that's brilliant. And that speaks to I think one of the questions that we had left there we hadn't quite gotten to, which is great. And yeah, you know, it is that engagement piece that's so critical, and looking for different ways of doing that as well over time. So yeah, Mike, go ahead.
No, I'll jump in next and say, you know, my time when I was serving in the cities, Kansas City in particular, we looked at we took a very similar approach to what City of Dallas did, and we looked at a shovel-ready project, and then we layered technology on top of that. That was for the streetcar project here in Kansas City, which was very successful. Dallas has taken it to the next level again with the engagement, the way that they've done it, the way that they have brought multiple departments together. I think that is the next evolution and a refinement of that process of looking through a public works lens of shovel-ready projects and then finding ways to layer technology on top of that. You know, most cities in the United States either have already started or are in the process of converting their streetlights from old high-pressure sodium vapor to the LED lights. And as you are embarking, as your community is embarking on that, you need to think about layering the controls, the smart controls on top of that, that will extend the capabilities of that asset and give you entrance to a lot of strategic points across your entire city. And now find those other projects like Dallas did, find those other public works projects, a sidewalk refreshment, street resurfacing or streetscaping, or, you know, water main replacements. Look at those and try to figure out ways to layer technology on that to kind of get an amplification effect.
Yeah, for sure. And Joey, that comes back into, you know, what you've been talking about with, you know, dig once.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't have a lot sort of revelatory to say then at this point in time. I want to, you know, emphasize what my colleagues here have already said. You know, from my own experience in city government, from looking at governments across this country, you know, when it comes to these types of projects, you know, it's pilot, integrate, iterate, right? So as Genesis said, like, people have told us what they want. Let's go and do something, right? Let's go and start building something, use all that information, do it on a smaller scale. I think Dallas was very wise in doing this kind of test program and show people what they want, right? My sort of theory of the human being, right, is that people better know what they don't want than what they do until they see it, right? So it's easier to get a reaction against than for, so let's show them what they could have. But you got to start small. You got to prove the financial case. You got to prove the benefit case to the community. But you start gaining momentum, right? And then you so the second point, integrate. You do that dig once policy so that it's minimal disruption. It's thoughtful about all of the concerns in the community, but you try to pack as much in there. Don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good, but, you know, be as thoughtful as you can and iterate. You keep rolling that out across your community. Sounds simple. I know very well it's not simple, but it's an approach that I have personally found effective, that I have seen quite effective in other communities. And, you know, hats off to Dallas for showing the way for so many cities in this country.
Oh, awesome. Thank you so much. I think it's a pretty good note to end on, and nice nice to be positive. Where yeah, so it's been a really fascinating session, and I hope people have taken away, something from it that they wanted to. And I mean, you guys have been crazy busy in the background, answering questions, typing as well as on screen. So I think people definitely will have taken something from it. If there are other questions, we always encourage people to reach out and connect through LinkedIn, through email. And I'm sure that our speakers here be happy to kind of help where they can answer any other questions. But this has been, a really excellent session, and I think really eye-opening and very practical as well. It's really always great to see these real-world examples and how they're, the fact that they're tangible, the fact they're working, and as you said at the end, Joey, being iterative and scaling over time. It's the approach that city governments are taking now to begin that work. It has to start somewhere, and so it's a really good example. And one final plug as well: if there is further reading with our Dallas City profile. So if you're interested, go and take a look. There is a link in the chat. Otherwise, head to smartcitiesworld.net, and no doubt you will see a banner for it somewhere. But that's all from us for now. Thanks all for watching. Thanks to our panel here for taking part, and I'm sure we'll see you on the next one. Thank you all so much.
Thank you, Luke.
Thank you.
Thank you.